Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Cruelty has become a defining characteristic of our politics, kind of across the board. And it's a shift that was troubling for many in the psychology community long before our present administration. Okay. But the president's public persona is marked by, and this is not an opinion, this is just reality, is marked by a meanness. As a New York State real estate developer, this meanness, I call it, was largely hidden for the most part. But as he gained notoriety, it surfaced in his behavior. He began using disparaging nicknames to belittle people, a bullying tactic that tragically often stuck. His reputation as a corrupt businessman also reflects this pattern. These are just facts. He was known for leaving contractors unpaid, using lawsuits to bully those who challenged him. This was a form of small-scale cruelty. As he became more prominent, his actions took on a greater and more public scale. The cruelty became a central feature, has become a central feature of his presidency. His style, according to James Comey, former FBI director, at least for a little while, said that the president's style was like a mob boss. While we may never know the full extent of such a mob boss's cruelty, it seems to be clear that Trump shares in some of the traits. The crackdown on immigrants is a prime example of this. And I want to take a moment on looking at this. Okay. An example of this cruelty. The Trump administration has unleashed a new kind of enforcement with masked and armed immigration and custom enforcement agents on our streets, or referred to as ICE, right? This wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate choice to bring fear into the undocumented community. From the start, Trump weaponized fear and hatred of immigrants. This has been part of his shtick since he first ran to be president. And here he is now using a military-style response to what should just be routine law enforcement. This militarized response with masked agents is far beyond typical what local law enforcement would do, right? We are in the midst of a dangerous trend. Echoing, I think, the historic warning of the pastor Martin Niemöller, who said, and you probably are familiar with this quote, who said, they first came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the unionists, but I didn't speak out because I wasn't, part of a union. And then they came for the Jews, but I didn't speak out because I wasn't Jewish. Then they came for me, and you know what? There was no one to speak up for me. As I look at how the undocumented population is being dealt with, I wanted to look at congressional reports to just kind of get the lowdown and the basics of the impact of the undocumented population upon our nation. And the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, projects that immigration will boost the U.S. GDP by $1.3 trillion by 2034, and cumulatively from 2024 to 2034 will increase the GDP by $8.9 trillion. These gains stem from an increased labor force, higher wages, and greater demand for housing, boosting tax revenue through income, payroll, and property taxes. The House Senate Joint Committee had a report that came out in December, and it emphasized the undocumented immigrants' role in sustaining economic growth in our nation. They report that undocumented individuals contribute $580 billion in taxes annually, $1.6 trillion in consumer spending annually, $48 billion in earnings, and $46 billion in consumer spending in a given year. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, review concluded that over time, tax revenues from both legal and unauthorized immigrants exceed the costs of public services that they use. You know, there are multiple, look it up, there are multiple congressional and federal bodies who consistently show that undocumented immigrants add significantly to the GDP and tax revenues. Okay? They support essential sectors of our nation like agriculture and construction and services. They contribute much more in taxes than they receive in benefits. Contributing, especially to Social Security, Medicare, and health care. And the benefit of these immigrants, the economic spending that they would generate, oh my gosh, would be so much more if integrated through legalization, if these individuals were integrated through legalization and began that process. Now let me say, with regard to services that are offered them, they're very basic. Emergency care. If someone has been abused, a social service can often be there for them in that abuse. But just real basic, get them through the tragedy of that moment. But that's it. Children have access to public education. Okay. These are just basics, okay? And you think, well, it costs us so much. Let me tell you, the undocumented immigrant population has no access to Medicaid, okay? Unless it's a real extreme emergency situation that needs to be addressed, and then that is just, to stabilize and then send them on their way. No access to Medicare. The supplemental security income, no access to Social Security. No access to the temporary assistance for needy families. No access to the supplemental nutrition assistance program, SNAP, like food stamps. No access to that. And no access to the Affordable Care Act and its subsidies. So enough already. And they're adding to the economy what services, basic services that they're able to access to a degree, fall so short of how much they bring financially, comparing the two. Just saying. Well, what about all the crime that they're bringing? Well, let me tell you, the only state that has looked at the crime rate of immigrants, immigration status and criminal records, has been, of all places, Texas, okay? Big MAGA state, right? Well, a study found that undocumented immigrants had the lowest felony arrest rates, lower than legal immigrants. Specifically, U.S.-born citizens Oh my gosh. They were over twice as likely to be arrested for violent crimes. Legal citizens were 2.5 times more likely to be arrested for drug crimes. They were over 4 times more likely for property crimes compared to undocumented people. For serious offenses like homicide, assault, and sexual assault, U.S.-born citizens were roughly twice as likely to be arrested than an undocumented person. For crimes such as robbery and burglary, theft and arson, the disparities were even larger, anywhere from 3 to 5 times. The rates were higher for American citizens compared to undocumented immigrants. They keep our economy strong and proportionally are part of the crime stats compared to U.S. citizens, are much less likely to commit a crime, our undocumented neighbors. Silence from the Trump party as he has turned militarized federal officers on immigration communities, and as he turns the militarized officers on protesters in LA, is palpable and profoundly distressing. Now the Attorney General of Texas, is of the state, has threatened the State House Democrats of being arrested for boycotting a special legislative session. All of this just is in the same MO of indicating cruelty is not contained, but is spreading in so many facets and aspects of our life. This president also displays a clear vindictiveness. Right? The name Alligator Alcatraz, a Florida detention center, is a perfect example. Naming a swamp prison after a notorious federal prison isn't a coincidence. It's a nod to a certain kind of cruelty, one that is being embraced more and more. Sending, just recently, right, National Guard into Washington, D.C., a city whose crime rate has been lowering, has been reducing. It's just one more endeavor to use fear and power because, well, that man in the White House can do that. When a leader engages in such behaviors and is met with approval, their actions only escalate. The political party that supports him is becoming desensitized to this new reality. As a result, our society is at risk in becoming and accepting this cruelty and this meanness and this vindictiveness as the new normal. Based on my experiences with trauma survivors, we must avoid 2 dangerous conclusions, and here they are. First, sustained trauma becomes normalized, and people accept cruelty as the way things are. And second, once a new normal is established, it can take years for society to move past it, and some people never do. We must not allow our nation to fall into this new normal, though I fear that it is. And despite our historic faults, our common culture has always carried a great beauty, a sense of caring for one another and caring for the world around us. Dear friends, we cannot and we must not lose that now. Amen.